Everybody, hello, everybody, and welcome to another week in space. Fun, right? How's everybody doing out there? We are deep in the eclipse portal, and it's getting real. I don't know how y'all are feeling, but it feels yeah, it's pretty electrical out there. Feels a little fraught. So I hope that y'all are doing well. I hope that y'all are able to take care of yourselves. I would recommend being real gentle. Okay, yeah. Unruly Bloom says I'm struggling as a Pisces. And I'm curious if that is just the regular Piscean struggles of daily life, or the activation of the eclipse. And sometimes it's hard to like separate these things out. Hi, welcome everybody. Come on in. Good morning, Leslie, or good afternoon, good evening to you where you're at. Yes, come on in, settle on down, get yourself something good to drink, uh, take a load off, and let's talk about some stories. Let's talk about space for a little bit. Um, Ooh, yeah. Lauren says my show on SoundCloud really helps. And it's a great radio show. Yeah, thank you so much. And for those of y'all who don't know, I have a weekly astrology themed radio show on SoundCloud, also on my Patreon. It's called The Melee Report. It comes out every Friday for patrons. And then every Saturday, I release it to the general public. I'll put a link in my stories on Instagram if y'all want to check it out. For those of y'all on Astrostar, yeah, check it out. It's on SoundCloud under Camp Wizard Camp, or you can look up the Melee Report. Um, oh, Gina Marie is asking what adventure we have this week. Oh, just you wait, Gina Maria. We're talking Aries and we're talking Venus, because Venus is moving into Aries. We're getting this Aries eclipse at the beginning of next week. We got Mercury stationing all up in Gatorade today, April the 1st. Ha ha ha, April Fools. No, seriously. Mercury's in Gatorade. You better watch out. So that's all going down. That's some of the adventures that we got. And yeah, before we like dive all up into it, I do this program, this weekly adventure through Astrostar Live, which is an excellent astrology app that you can get wherever you get your apps at. It is a great astrological community with real live astrologers, not that AI nonsense, but it's real people like me. Well, I think I'm real. I may be a glitch in the matrix, but I'm pretty sure I think I'm real. And yeah, real folk doing real astrology from a variety of backgrounds, dropping some excellent astrological knowledge, doing talks like this. I do this every Monday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, making that 10 a.m. Pacific Time and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So feel free to tune on in and interact, ask questions. And yeah, I like to just sort of unpack what's going on in the weekly astrological weather forecast to help folks out to one, to sort of get us versed in astrology so we can notice, oh, this is happening, this is how I'm feeling. How does like what it says in the ephemeris or what Jonah said relate to my actually lived experience of this, and getting us in touch with the archetypes and their relationships in the world and in our psyche so that we are come into a greater relationship with the animate world, right? Yeah, Gina Maria says that they can vouch for me that I'm actually real and we've met in person. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, somebody. Sometimes I question it myself. Um, and yeah, so I don't know if you're interested, check out the Astrostar Live app. There's a link in my bio. There's one in my stories. There's other great astrologers doing some really great work there, like Sam Reynolds, Tara Attal, a bunch of people who like speak at NORWAC and are very respected in the astrological community, people that I look up to. And I get a lot of info from the Astrostar app, and you can book readings with astrologers as well, including myself. I am super busy, but I think that I'm available on Sundays. Sundays, if anyone is interested in looking deeper into their chart, or how this eclipse might be affecting you. Because again, we are right now in between the two eclipses, the lunar eclipse that was happening last week on a Monday sometime. I don't know. I'm just feel lost. Anyway, there was a lunar eclipse that felt really intense. Now we have like the sort of integration period, and I think this is how eclipses function. It's not just like that moment, right? It's that the eclipse is sort of like a phenomena where we sit there and we're like, wow, isn't that interesting, right? Look at that thing covering that other thing. And it feels sort of weird. Sleep gets disrupted. There's like maybe some dysregulation. And then that sort of like emanates out over days, weeks, months, right? Um, and right now we're sort of in that integration emanation phase. And then we're going to get the solar eclipse, which is going to be another sort of jolt. And I think in some ways solidify some stuff that's been coming up or sort of point the pathway forward. But eclipses are this really intense kind of faded, almost like electrical energy that can be really kind of dysregulating to the system. And so this week, if you can, and over the next couple of weeks, if possible, I recommend, being very kind to yourself, right? And kind to each other. I think that's also going to be a really important factor in all of this. And to take baths, get massages, meditate, have quiet time, reflection time, journaling time, listen to good music, eat good food, really like care for ourselves and our nervous system and the parts of us that get churned up and dysregulated through the eclipse. Because I always think about this as sort of, our like, just like shaking up the box, right? And then pouring it out is kind of the vibe that eclipse has. And it's just like, whoa, I thought everything was one way and now it's something else. Oh, that's really weird. Um, okay. Unruly Bloom asks if I can weigh in on CoStar. Is it AI because it doesn't feel real? I don't know. I actually don't really use that app very much. But I don't think any of the stuff is signed by an astrologer, and so I think there's some issues that come up with that in the sense that if either A, it's AI, right? And they're just sort of like generating information about things with an archetype, which can be helpful, right? Because uh, I think that it can be helpful, right? Because you're getting the information, right? But if it's done by a real person and they're not getting credit for it, I think that's sort of obnoxious, right? To just have people who are writing anonymously. Because astrology, I see astrology as both a science and an art, right? There's the science of yeah, and Ultra Dimensional is saying that CoStar doesn't give you the degrees, right? And I think that's the issue that I've really had with. Thank you, Leslie. That's the issue that I've really had with apps like CoStar is it gives you like sort of basic overview things, but it doesn't give you the degrees. It doesn't give you the specifics. It doesn't give you the ability to like really learn the stuff for yourself, and it kind of makes you dependent on it. And I think that's kind of a business model the same way it's not having like actual astrologers that are taking credit for their work. And I think again, this is the art and science of astrology. Like we can know the archetypes, we can know like, first house means this, second house means this, third house means this, et cetera, right? We can know the sort of words and the verbs and the adjectives, right? And we can know how to put together a sentence, but like putting together a really good sentence and being able to write poetry with the kind of structure of language, that's really important, I think, right? And I think apps like that don't really give you the tools to like make the art of it. And that's something that I'm really interested in, right? Is not just like this is what the formula says. I'm more interested in like how can we write poetry? How can we tell new tales, right? How can we identify the mythology that we're living in, and how do we rewrite these myths, and how do we dream these forward, right? Um, Oh yeah. So Lauren's saying astrology is so complex. That is true. It's a lifetime of work and learning on the backs of thousands of years of study from those before us. And I think that well said, well said. And I think that's really important to acknowledge and also, to notice what is my place in this, right? And maybe we don't need to learn, like we don't need to read Valens and Abu Mashar and all of the people who've come before us. Maybe we can also recognize where am I located in the history of time, in the history of the system. What is my contribution to it? Personally, I'm like, I need to read everything. I need to know everything, right? I'm really curious about the source texts and the kind of people who have come before me. However, I don't think that everybody necessarily needs to do that, right? I think that it's also, right, we can jump into poetry at sort of the postmodern era, right? And beat poetry, and we can start writing poetry. And I think that's legitimate, right? We can kind of arrive where we are and use astrology to help us understand our lives, right? If we are offering it to other people, I think that it's ethical to have a framework, to have a basis, to have things that we can refer back to. But I think that astrology also functions as a context and a lens, as a way that we can perceive the world that we're living in and the hero's journey, if we want to think it that way, think about it that way, that we're on. Um, yeah, nothing means anything. I appreciate your poetry. Thank you. What do we got over here? Uh, yeah, Mary C says it does seem more of an art than a science, more of an art at the same time it is a science. So much is in the interpretation and what comes through the moment, right? And I think that, right, the having the structure to know this is what these things mean, and then to see it and be like, to get the like counter transference of being like, oh, this is what I'm feeling right now. And I think that this is why like multiple people can look at a singular event and have different takes on it, and I think that's really valuable, right? So y'all ready for this? Okay, today, Monday, April the 1st, April Fool's Day, April Fools. Um, Mercury stations retrograde at 27 minutes and 13 degrees Aries. Excuse me one second. Let me get my prop. I almost forgot that it was actually April Fool's Day today. Okay, Mercury stations retrograde at 27 degrees and 13 arc minutes of Aries. Okay, so this year, I'm sorry, I was just looking at the comments. This year, Mercury's making their retrogrades in fire signs. Last year, it was all earth signs, right? So 2023, we were thinking about like practical things, rethinking practical things, finance, housing, right? The kind of physical structures of life, the practical things that we were doing on a regular basis. Right. This year, we are rethinking fire, right? We are rethinking our passions, our desires, our motivations that cause us to act, right? And I think one of the things that we're going to see this year is that action becomes frustrated during these retrograde periods, right? And the things that we want to do, the things that we're all fired up about, are going to happen a little slower, right? They're going to they're they're going to be thwarted, and that's going to bring up a lot of frustration, right? I think that when the fire doesn't have an outlet, it just gets burns hotter and hotter and hotter. And so I think something that's going to be important over this year is being able to cool ourselves off and keep our heads cool, right? Mercury is thinking, it's cognition, it's communication, it's the stories we're telling, right? And when we're like, oh, I've got to do this, and then it's like, oh, you can't do this, right? Because, something totally out of your control, and we find ourselves trapped or stuck or unable to sort of actuate and actualize the thing that we're trying to do, it like builds up, and maybe we tell stories about it over and over and over again, right? And speeds up, and it creates a lot of friction, right? And burns us up, right? Yeah, Leslie says they're literally overheated right now. Um, yeah, when water doesn't have an outlet, it's the same, right? It builds up pressure, and water gets really heavy, right? And so that will like push down walls. Fire gets really hot, right? And if you've ever seen the movie Backdraft with Billy Baldwin, which is one of my favorite 90s movies, what happens when fire gets trapped is it eats up all the oxygen in a space, right? And then it will sort of lay low until a door or window or oxygen is introduced into that enclosed space, and then the fire just eats all the oxygen and explodes, right? I highly recommend watching Backdraft. I think I'm going to do that myself. Love that movie. But I think that's a really great example of like a frustrated fire. When it gets stuck, it just waits for a breath, for some oxygen, and then it just like lets loose and explodes, right? And I think one of the things that we can think about is like how to keep our heads cool, how to keep ourselves cool as that like fire is building up or feeling trapped. And Carolyn Casey, one of my favorite astrologies, talks about Eshu, who is a mercurial figure, right? God of the crossroads. And there's in the Santeria and Yoruba religions, right? And one of the things that is recommended, right, is wearing a cool cloth on one's head to like cool off issue, right, to keep our heads cool, right, and that helps us to be a better conduit to the wisdom of the cosmos, right, because when we have all that fire in our brain, like just burning and churning, right, it cuts us off from maybe that more dynamic flow of the information that can be coming in, right, and so what Carolyn Casey recommends, and I haven't studied Yoruba religion or Santeria very much. I have a couple books. I know a little bit. I know some people, but it's not my area of expertise. But what Carolyn Casey talks about is like, you know, wearing a cool cloth on one's head, keeping one's head cool, right? Pouring water at the crossroads as a way of like cooling things off. So one of the things that I just like to recommend with the Mercury retrogrades in Aries, but also all of them coming up this year, is like thinking about ways of keeping ourselves cool, right? Of cooling down the system, of cooling down the head, of noticing where there's friction and where there's heat and where there's frustration, creating that friction, and the ways that we can cool that off and cool down the system, and also like help our nervous systems. Mercury has a lot to do with the nervous system. Right. And if like the I think about like nervous system getting hot, right? And things just getting fried. And so again, you know, wanting to like cool things down and to keep a cool head, right? And to stay cool, man. You know what I'm saying? So like that is my recommendation for this Mercury retrograde. Just stay cool, right? All right. You know, also another way of thinking about this. Yeah, and so I'm just checking back to my notes. Another way of thinking about this, right, is that like this heat is going to build up both internally and also externally, right? So we're going to maybe be experiencing hotter climates over 2024, which I think science is already predicting. Um, and so another reason that we want to try and stay cool and increase the cool, right? Um, and yeah, just like give ourselves space, give ourselves breath, give ourselves a pause, because I think that there is going to be added frustration and people are going to be popping off in like irrational ways. With the retrograde in Aries, I think that there's this thing that's going to come up, and I've been thinking about this for a couple weeks and looking at the news. I'm like, okay, I can see where that's going. But I think that like fiery rhetoric, right? People who are just like blah 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 blah, right? This thing, which we see in the news. Maybe you're like noticing around you. I think people who are getting aggravated, agitated, and just like spouting off over the next couple weeks are going to have to like walk these things back a little bit. And I think that we're already seeing that in the news with you know, the trials of Donald Trump and like gag orders and stuff like that, and just a lot of the sort of fiery rhetoric that we're seeing in the political sphere that's been coming out over the last couple weeks since Mercury hit their shadow, and I think since Mercury went into Aries, because Mercury in Aries is like, I've got something to say, right, and gets very like combative, right, and argumentative, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but when we are just like arguing for the sake of argument or saying inflammatory things, I think in that retrograde, it's like, whoop, like gotta like rethink that. Ooh, sorry, didn't mean that. Or ooh, like now there's actual consequences, potential consequences to my languaging, and I'm gonna have to like walk that back a little bit. Um, Sorry, I'm just checking the comments real quick. Okay, so the other thing that the retrogrades in Aries and also in the fire signs makes me think about is the alchemical process. And Aries is the sign that is the traditionally is when we begin the great work of alchemy, right? Or this is when the alchemists would begin the great work of alchemy. And alchemy can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The way that I kind of understand it is on one level, it is the process of turning lead into gold, right? That's the most basic. But if we sort of deepen that, we're taking the kind of lead pressure of tragedy, difficulty, challenge, the day-to-day suffering of life, and transforming that into the gold of the wisdom that kind of is at the seed or the core of our experience. Also, the kind of leaden, like unconscious self, right? The unaware self. And through processes, creative process, alchemical process, therapeutic process, psychological process, we are getting to the uh, core material of the self, the gold of the self, the wisdom, right? The authentic self, right? That lives at, buried within the lead of consciousness and unconsciousness, right? And so this work traditionally began in Aries season. And as Mercury retrogrades through Aries, right, and we're like thinking about maybe an increase of heat, I think about one of the first processes in the alchemical work, which is calcination, which is just burning things to a crisp, right? And so the alchemists, they would be like, okay, I'm gonna like alchemize, this rock, I'm gonna just burn it. Right? I'm gonna scorch this thing for like a week, right? And burn away all of the impurities and leach out everything that isn't its like most authentic, pure essence. And again, the work of alchemy, I think, is getting to the essence of things. And so we're like, as Mercury retrogrades through Aries, I think we're burning away impurities. We are burning away what's unnecessary. We are burning away what's superfluous. I think I said that right, to get to the core essence of something. And coming back to just this idea of like apps with AI generated reports, right? I think there is a desire to dig deeper, right? To get to the core essence of what this means for me, or what is astrology, or how can I apply this astrology to my life and to my experience. Um, uh, and so I think that we're kind of in a process as Mercury retrogrades today as we enter into April. And April is a pretty intense month, right? We have Mercury retrograde, we have the solar eclipse in Aries, we have Jupiter and Uranus conjunct in Taurus, and then we have Jupiter entering into Gemini in May. Um, and so, I think there is this like real kind of alchemical process that's happening where like things are getting boiled, things are getting cooked, right? Impurities are coming to the surface. And as that happens, it's really uncomfortable. And I think this is a Mercury in retrograde process as like what's difficult and what's challenging gets boiled and comes to the surface. We need to have awareness of that and let it go, right? Sort of slough it off, right? So that we can be left with what is the most vital essence of the self, right? What is the the thing that is the most important. And what we don't want to do is mistake what we think we are, what we think we should be, what we the point that we're trying to make for what is really vital and valuable, right? And I think this is really key. I was talking to somebody yesterday, a friend of mine about yeah, Wounded Healer Mama Six says smoking those old ideas and patterns so we can grow. Exactly. Right. And yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about like nonviolent communication, and they're talking about which they had studied, and they were saying that one of their teachers was like, do you want to be right or do you want to be in connection? And I think this is a really interesting kind of piece for this whole week, right? Because I think that Mercury in Aries has this, and the whole vibe of Aries is like, I want to be right, and I'm holding on to rightness. Right. I'm holding on to me being right, or the point that I'm trying to make. And as this gets cooked and boiled, right, and smokes off, and getting to the deeper layers of that and being like, ooh, like, do I really want to be right? Is it that important to me? Or actually do I want to like be in connection with myself, with other people, with the world, right? What am I actually trying to do here? And what is winning this battle actually do for me in service of the longer term goal? Which brings me to my next transit. Uh, yeah. Unruly Bloom says, I always want to be right. And you are right. Okay. Moving on to Thursday, April the 4th. We have the sun conjunct the north node in Aries at 15 degrees and 37 arc minutes. Um, Okay. Just gonna check the comments real quick. Mercury transiting my 10th house where my natal Mars in Aries lives. Imagine how that plays out. Um, well, Michelle, one of the ways that we can think about this is, right, I have a 10th house Mars, right? And so the way that I think about my 10th house Mars is I'm never going to work for anybody else as long as I can help that, right? I need to work for me. I need to make my own schedule, and I'm very driven towards like um, I'm very driven towards like not necessarily career, but like what I am passionate about, what I think of as my work in the world. Thank you, Gwen. And so, if we have Mercury conjunct coming in by transit to conjunct that 10th house Mars, and a Mercury conjunction is quick, right? And that's kind of nice. It's just like a little wisp when we get a retrograde, it slows down and it moves much more slowly. And so it has more time to unfold and the themes unpack, right? And so if we have Mercury in the 10th house, it might be like new ideas about career and career direction, right? Oh, everybody on this call has a 10th house Mars, I see. That's why like everybody at like, 11 in the morning, 10 in the morning can just be on their phones because they all work for themselves. Respect. Nice one. But I think Mercury is like bringing in new ideas about like what you can do for your career. And I think that some restraint of pen and tongue might be nice, right? Because you don't want to just like kick down the door in your boss's office and be like, I quit, right? And I wouldn't necessarily do that today. But thinking about how do you really honor that Mars, right? And Mars is sort of driven. Mars is our drive. Mars is the gas pedal, right? And so how can you honor your drive towards what you want to do in the world, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean quitting our job, right? Sometimes it means getting a job that like pays the bills so you can actually do what you want. But I think that Mercury conjunct Mars during this retrograde is like rethinking, what those drives, right? And rethinking the actions that you are taking and where your actions have taken you. um, okay. All right, all right, all right. Let's see what we got over here. Gina Maria saying, I used to always have to be right. Yeah, and I think being right is important, but also what is the kind of larger whoa, Unruly Blooms quit 2 jobs in the last 24 hours. Congratulations. I envy you. Okay. Moving on to Thursday, April the 4th, we have the sun in Aries conjunct the north node in Aries at 15 degrees and 37 minutes. So the nodes of the moon, the north and south node, are the points where the eclipses occur. And when we have a lunation coming up around any type of conjunction of the sun to the nodes, that means we are getting an eclipse. Right, when we have the luminaries near the nodes doing a full moon or a new moon, we are getting an eclipse, and you all know this because we're in the midst of eclipse season. Um, and so with this conjunction on Thursday, I think that we're going to start seeing the themes of what this solar eclipse is going to be bringing up. And this is an intense one. This is a total solar eclipse crossing the U.S. from Texas to like Maine or something, or upstate New York. Um, this is sort of reminiscent of the total eclipse that was happening in 2017, if y'all can remember back then, which went from west to east. This one's going from north to south. This eclipse is going to be conjunct Chiron, and it's also conjunct the U.S. natal Chiron. So I think it's going to be like bringing up a lot of themes around wounding, right? Core wounding, scapegoating, right? Which I think is like a chironic feature. Also, medicine and healing, right? What can heal these wounds, right? Um, and so, but all of this is not necessarily easy. I think about Chiron and Chiron activations as like needing to reset a bone, right? Maybe like a bone that set all messed up, right? And makes us walk in a certain way, or like we can't hold things right. And then when we get a Chiron activation, it's the opportunity to like re-break it so that we can actually heal it, but that's incredibly painful, and it can bring up a lot of feelings. So we'll get to that in a minute, but I think that these themes are going to start bubbling to the surface as this week progresses. And again, we're getting the eclipse next Monday. I'll touch on it a little bit today, and then we'll revisit it next Monday because this report will be going on basically like before and during the eclipse. So that's exciting. Um, so the North Node, right, is thought about in a couple different ways. In the evolutionary system, we think about the North Node as the sort of remedy to the South Node issues. So the South Node is conceived of as the kind of accumulated wisdom, the habituated patterning of an individual or a society or a system. And the North Node is what we are being asked to move towards, right? This is I've heard this described as the South Node would be your parents' house, right? And then the North Node would be your first apartment. And as we leave the South Node, we can't take everything. Um, oh, uh, I'll pause that for a second. Okay. Unruly Bloom says, what if you were born wounded? And I think that that is an excellent question. And one might say that we are all born wounded because the birth process is an initial trauma, right? And Stan Groff has done a lot of work around birth trauma and holotropic experience through breath work and psychedelic experience to go back and repair birth trauma, right? But the act of being born, of leaving the womb, is a traumatic experience. And actually, this dovetails really nicely into the idea of Aries, because Aries is this sign of um, you were never born. Please say more. Aries is a sign of individuation, and we can think about Pisces as that womb space, that in undifferentiated consciousness, that we are connected with the mother. We are like in a state of like ambient fluid where we're being fed and breathed for, and we are connected to the everything, right? And we can think about this as the sort of Piscean sea of the unconscious. And then as we are born, we are separated from that. The umbilical cord is cut. We are an individual self who comes into the terror of the world, and we need to develop the courage to face that. And so this is very much the kind of Aries story, is leaving and separating from the collective consciousness and developing an individual sense of self and a separate identity. Um, uh, okay, yeah. Lauren says, I have a 12th house Pisces, and I do feel like I'm perpetually womb dwelling, which nothing wrong with that. That sounds great, you know. Um, Um, and okay, so if you're born by C-section, I think that's also, this is a birth process, right? This is how we are born. This is how we come into the world. And I think it's all traumatic, right? Leaving that 12th house Piscean womb place is traumatic, right? And I think that there's a part of us that is always seeking to get back there. And that can be like Neptune is in the chart as a representative of that 12th house, right? Piscean placements, these can all be representations of that, but I don't think that like a C-section or an induced birth alters, right, like who we are in this life. I think this is the sort of activating event which like helps to forge who we are in our consciousness in the way that we show up. Let me just check this. Okay, Gina Maria says Mars and Libra in the 11th, and Chiron totally conjunct the MC. Um, yeah, Chiron conjunct the MC can be like, having to deal with the wounds of being in public, the wounds of like being on stage, and also being a healer for one's profession, right? Like being on a path of teaching and healing, right? Our Chiron conjunct the MC, but in order to do that, we have to do our own kind of like inner work first, because we can't take anybody to a place that we haven't been yet. And I think that is a really important thing to consider. And so as yeah, uh I think the sun conjunct the north node in Aries, right, helps to pull us from that undifferentiated like longing to return to the womb, right? And it's this pull towards individuation, pull towards the self, pull towards creating an identity for the self, right? um and a pull towards our kind of quest as an individual, right? Which can be really challenging, and I think it can also get very murky sometimes. Um, da-da-da-da. um, and I think I see this kind of reflected um, in the mythology around Aries, which is the myth of the Golden Fleece, which has a couple of parts, right? But I'm going to kind of bounce around talking about this for a minute. But, one of the pieces of this myth is that there is a golden fleece that is hanging in the sacred grove of Ares, the Greek god of war, on the island of Colchis. And Jason has to go and retrieve it to prove his worth, to prove his ability to belong, to prove his kingship, right? And he is sent on this quest by his evil stepfather, Pallas, who, this is kind of a trope in myths and fairy tales where they're like the evil king, the usurping uncle, is like, go and do this impossible quest because I know it will kill you, right? And then you will be out of my hair and it won't be a big deal. Right. And I think one of the things that happens with this trope is that we have this evil, like father figure or king figure who sends us on an impossible quest. And this is what actually makes us who we are. Right. And we can think about this as our the challenges of life, right, the frustrations, which are the things that actually forge who we are and help us to activate our heroic nature. And it is the evil king who helps us to be our best self by sending us to perform impossible tasks of initiation. Right. And this is one of the pieces of the Jason myth, and I think is a really big piece of the story of Ares. Right. And this happens to Jason twice. Two kings, his uncle, right, who's maybe the terrestrial father figure, Pallas, sends him to Colchis to get the golden fleece, and then King Aeetes, who is the maybe right, transpersonal father figure, right, the divine father, sends him on even more impossible quests to retrieve the golden fleece, right? But these challenges are what make us who we are. This is how we are able to activate our heroic nature. And a friend of mine, Daisy Campbell, who's a playwright, was talking about story structure, and is like, if you want to know what a character is made of, who a character actually is, just keep applying that pressure, right? And it is the pressure that the pressure that the main character, that the hero, is under, is what forces them to reveal their true nature by the choices that we make when we're under pressure. And it's all good to be like, oh, I would do this in this situation, I would do that in that situation. But when the pressure is on, right, and it's game time, like, how do we respond? How do we react? And that really reveals our kind of core nature. And so it is the sort of impossible challenges that are given to us, like dishes, right, and grocery shopping, that really reveal who we truly are, right? And that is what allows that heroic nature to come online. Um, um, and so another kind of aspect of this myth, the prequel to this myth, is about Hele and Phrixus, um, who are the children of Nephili, who is a cloud goddess, and a mortal king. And so Nephili and this mortal king, whose name escapes me at this moment, get together. They have Hele and Phrixus, and then they break up because it's really hard to maintain an ongoing relationship with a ephemeral cloud goddess. And so they break up, they go their separate ways, and the king marries the evil stepmother trope, who is not into his children. She has her own children. She wants them to rule the kingdom after the king is gone. And so she devises a plan to get rid of Hele and Phrixus, right? And she starts spreading rumors that they are poisoning the soil, and that they are the reason that the crops are dying. The queen actually roasts all of the grain seeds to sterilize them. Right. And then when the crops don't grow, she blames Helium Phrixus, and she even sends somebody to the oracle at Delphi and bribes this messenger to say, "Oh yeah, it was these two kids. That's the reason. And if we kill them, then everything will be better." And so as they are going to be killed, Nephili, their divine cloud mother, sends in Chrysimalos, this flying ram, to rescue them, and swoops them up and carries them to the Isle of Colchis. In flight, Hele, the female twin, loses her grip and falls into the ocean and is lost, and some say becomes a sea goddess. And Phrixus makes it all the way, at which point he sacrifices Chrysimalos to the gods, and hangs the golden fleece, or hangs the skin of the ram in a tree in this great grove sacred to Ares, and the fleece becomes golden. And Phrixus is protected by Aeetes, right? And so that's sort of the broad strokes of the myth, and I just want to like unpack it for a second, because I think there's a lot in there. And so first off, we have this stepmother, right? The evil stepmother trope who comes between the children and their mother, right? And Nephili, their mother, is a cloud goddess, right? A cloud nymph, which is higher level consciousness, or we can think about that as higher level consciousness. Whereas the stepmother represents this sort of false mother who uh, wants the children destroyed because they are connected to this higher level consciousness. And we can think about this as the stepmother is kind of earthbound and stuck in the old ways, right? And wants the succession to follow the old ways and traditions and resist this new sense of consciousness or higher level consciousness represented by the children, Hele and Phrixus, and the sort of spirit which resides in them, which is this divine essence connected to, higher thought, right? Clouds, space, right? New ideas. And she's like, nah, that's not how it's going to go. Right. And so she like straight up gaslights everybody and is like, this new idea that these children embody is like what's poisoning the soil. Right. And that they are tainted. And she even like taints the oracle, right? Which I think is also part of that like intuitive consciousness, right? The oracular is this sort of higher level consciousness, whereas and she taints that and bends it towards this sort of like, oh no, like this is what the oracle said, that we got to keep it just this way, right? And I'm seeing these sort of themes, right? Just around kind of the rhetoric that is coming through the news media around like trans people, queer people, right? Trans Visibility Day as like usurping Easter, right? Or like that books are poisoning people's minds, right? And going to turn your kids queer, right? This is like that is the rhetoric that the stepmother is using and being like, no, like the queers are ruining the soil, right? Which is comes from a Dead Milkmen song, right? And it's like really gaslighting everybody and playing on their fears of survival fears, right? And really blaming these children who are just bringing in like a new consciousness, new ideas, and a new way of being, which is really threatening to the old order, right? And so she wants to have them killed. Um, and so yeah, and so these children are oh, nice one. Thank you, Wounded Healer. Yeah, and I think that this is like, this is why myth is vital, right? Because it's not like, oh yeah, there's a cloud goddess that like had two kids, right? Maybe I mean, yes, like these metaphors I think are vibrant and alive and real, right? And they we sort of refit into the structure of myth. And I think myth gives us a way of thinking about it, of being able to navigate the life and times that we're in, right? And a context that helps us to sort of move through all of this with wisdom and with grace. Right. And we can see like there's the stepmother and the fear of what they are afraid is going to be taken, that they're going to lose power, right? Because these children are bringing in this new consciousness. And so they're saved by this ram, this flying ram, right? That brings them from the old world into something new. Right. But there's also the sacrifice that happens, Hele, right? Which, in Jungian terms would be thought of maybe as the animus, right? This connection to the spirit of life, to the spirit of earth, right? To the intuitive knowing, to that oracular, falls back into the like sea of consciousness, right? And this is also the Aries kind of separation from that collective unconscious, right? And needing to like claim its own space and make its own way. And there's the part where it's like, okay, that like longing for that oneness needs to be released. It falls off of the back of the golden ram, right? And is able to live in that undifferentiated sea of consciousness, right? Is sacrificed to that so that Phrixus can go and make a new world, right? Can go and individuate, can go and become its own individual self and have its own spiritual identity, right? And also the ram, and Jason Hawley, who's a great astrologer, talks about this. The ram, right, which is this divine being, is sacrificed so that the mortal children can live, or the mortal child can live. right? And usually what we see is like mortal things are being sacrificed for the divine, right? But this is a reversal of that. This is where we're sacrificing the divinity and we're sacrificing the immortality, right? So that something new can be born, so that individual mortal consciousness can be born. And I think this is really important, and this is sort of the theme of Pisces into Aries, is that Pisces is this sort of immortality, that undifferentiated womb space, right? That all is good time. And then we need to sacrifice that. We need to give that up so that we can become an individual self with individual goals and values and needs, right? And I think what is really important, and this is sort of expressed in the second part of the myth, is it's not just about me. It's not just about you, right? We need each other. And Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece is very much a relational quest where he needs the help of all of the heroes. He needs the help of Chiron. He needs the help of Medea, right? He needs a lot of help to be able to individuate and complete our quest. Where's the space for the fish that is a stepmom to the Aries? I'm not really sure, but I will get back to you on that one. Um, so, okay, whoa, I just spent a lot of time. Okay, I want to whip through a couple more things real quick, just because we're sort of coming to an end of stuff, or I'm running out of time here. So on Thursday, April the 4th, the same day, we have Venus entering Aries. So Venus is in Aries until April the 29th, and Venus is in detriment in Aries, right? So I just want to be clear that a planet in detriment isn't bad or wrong, right? It's just a place where it doesn't have a lot of resource, right? And so Venus by its nature is moderately warm and moderately moist, right? And in Aries, a sign that is hot and dry, Venus is like, it's like too drying, it's too heating, right? It's like it's contrary to their nature. So their skin gets all dried out. They're all dehydrated, right? They feel like they're not looking very good, right? Venus's benefic qualities of moderately warm and moderately moist promotes life, where Aries heat, like Aries ruled by the malefic Mars, is hot and dry, right? Suppresses life. So Venus is feeling some challenges in there, right? But when a planet doesn't have an easy time, they need to be really resourceful, right? And they need to figure out other ways of getting their needs met. Because it doesn't just come easy. And again, this coming back to that like heroic quest, right? It is the places where we experience challenge that helps us to activate our true nature and our core essence. It's what causes us to get resourceful. It's what causes us to ask for help, right? It's what causes us to try new things. When things come easily, we can just sort of relax into it, which doesn't always make us activate our heroic nature or get the full experience, right? So a planet in detriment needs to get all MacGyver on it, right? And make do with what they have. They need to get creative and get clever. This can be great because it spurs innovation, it spurs creativity, right? Where it can get problematic is if we just rely on the hacks that we have figured out how to like make things work in challenging situations, and never sort of progress past that. And for example, right, if your phone doesn't charge except for like if you bend the cord a certain way, right? And so every time you need to charge your phone, you're like always like, oh, my phone's always on 2% because it doesn't charge right. But if I bend this cord this certain type of way, it works kind of like 75% of the time, and I can get by on that. And somebody's like, why don't you buy a new phone? You're like, oh, I can't afford that, right? Which is real, right? And but like when we step back and we think about all the time and the frustration and the like things that didn't work because our phone didn't work because we couldn't like get it to charge right, and we're just getting by on those sort of like clever, intuitive solutions that we come up with to deal with the kind of real world physical problems that we have. But we're never able to progress past that because we're like, it's good enough, right? And one of the things to consider with a planet in detriment is how do we honor that innovation and creativity that comes from challenge, right? Without resting on it's good enough, right? How can we like recognize when we get to a point where it's like, oh, I can do better, right? I don't need to just like be doing the thing that's helped me to survive for so long. I can actually like learn how to thrive here. Right, I can take the creativity and the know-how and the solutions that I've come up with and like level them up and like really know how to thrive, right, or learn how to thrive. And so I just wanted to bring that in as a context for planets in uh yeah. Um Thank you, Gina Maria, who's saying go to I break your fix and they can fix your charging point. Thank you. Right. And sometimes, right, this is like being able to ask a friend, which Venus and Aries maybe has a hard time with because they're like, oh, I think I should just do it my way. Right. Or I can't ask anybody, or I don't trust other people to help me. Right. And so this is a way of like moving out of that like detriment um place, right, of solution to find bigger solutions, right? um yeah, challenges a springboard instead of a plateau, exactly, right. And I think that uh yeah, and so like Venus and Aries can have a story that says like I don't have enough money to get a new phone or fix the problem. I need to do it my way, right? I can't ask anyone for help, right? And I think that Venus and Aries can have some like avoidant attachment stuff going on, and like maybe does not trust that other people can be there for them. And that there can be the story that Venus and Aries has, that I always need to like fight to prove that I'm worthy or that I deserve love, right? And if I show weakness, then maybe people won't love me, right? Um, yeah, and like while these stories may be adapted for the survival in the hot, dry climate of Aries, these stories also might be like holding somebody back, right? And so how can we adjust these stories around deserving, belonging, loving, right? To be able to provide more support for those Venusian parts, right? And how can we increase our joy and our sense of connection through shifting these stories, right? And coming back to that idea, like, do I want to be right or do I want to be in connection? Right. And I think that Mercury entering into Aries as well, right? Or like retrograding through Aries is really going to bring that up. Do I want to be right or do I want to be in connection? Right. And so I think Venus in Aries is also about learning to overcome fear and the fear of connection and intimacy. Right. And I think that there is a sense of like, oh, on to the next, right? Never like going to get too deep. A rolling stone gathers no moss, right? And so like I can just move on to the next relationship without having to like really have that like deeper intimacy. And one of the things that I've heard about intimacy is into me you see, right? So it's being able to create safety so that there could be vulnerability so that we can have true intimacy. And I think Venus and Aries is like, nah, I'm good. See ya. Right. And so I think that Aries is also about developing courage, right? And leaning in. So thinking about the ways that we can do that, and also, having the courage to be upfront and direct about what we want, right? What our needs are, what brings us pleasure, what brings us joy, right? And not being like having to shut those down to like seek connection. Uh, yeah. Yeah, and having the courage to just lean in and go deeper into relationship if you want to. I don't know. But I think so these are some of the things that are going to come up is like intimacy and connection and the fear that like activates, right? And having to have the courage to be honest with ourselves. Um yeah. Um Okay. So we got a couple minutes left. I'm gonna just finish this out. I wanted to talk about this total eclipse um of the sun in Aries. Maybe we'll talk about that next week, or maybe I'll see if I can schedule something another night this week to sort of give us a preview on that. But I have one more transit that I just want to go over. Ooh, yeah. Wounded Healer Mama Six says, "Be more moist and warm to others." Definitely, I support that. Um, okay, Sunday, March the 6th, we got Venus and Aries sextile Pluto. in Aquarius at 1 degrees and 57 minutes. Sextile is a supportive aspect. It is communication, right? And so the courage that this Aries courage is going to come in handy here as we are connecting in with Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, right? And this is actually going to like pull us deeper, right? Into the murky depths of relationship, right? Into passion and the power of passion and desire, which can feel intense and sometimes destabilizing and overwhelming. And I think with the Mercury retrograde, this is going to bring up, past relationships, right? Your exes are going to text you. It's going to bring up, longings and desires, right? And these things can be destabilizing. They can be threatening. They can be frightening, right? They can be derailing. And I think that Venus is asked to have the courage, right, to think about joy and pleasure and what is going to bring, right? What are our values, right? And how are our actions aligned with our values here? And I think that again, courage is the word that I want to bring in. And Pluto and Venus can be a transformational love, right? The fires of passion, love, and eros, which transforms us in that alchemical cauldron. This is the love that roasts and burns us. And it helps to get to the qualities, right, of our values that are the most important to us. Um, and so one of the things that I've been thinking about in terms of this Venus sextile to Pluto is the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, Eurydice. Um, and real quick, Orpheus is the greatest musician of all time. He falls in love with Eurydice. Pluto sees her, abducts her. She dies, right? Goes into the underworld. Orpheus is brokenhearted and goes to retrieve her. And by playing his music, right, he lulls Cerberus to sleep, and he plays the most beautiful song that anyone has ever heard that brings tears to Persephone's eyes. And she's like, "Okay, you get one shot. We'll let you take her back. But if as you're leaving the underworld, you look back and and you don't trust, then you lose her, and she's ours forever." And what do you think happens? Exactly that. And so, I bring up this story because I think Venus, right? The Venusian power of music, the Venusian power of love, right? Um, is what compels us to go into the underworld, right? It is no one would go into the underworld willingly unless it was for love, right? It is the power of love that helps us to face challenges, to do the unthinkable, to do what others would say is insane, right? And it's the power of love that Orpheus has for Eurydice that causes him to follow her into the underworld, right? There's also the Venusian power of music, which allows him to be able to get down there, right? Which allows him to best the challenges of the underworld, to put Cerberus to sleep, to change Persephone's mind, to change Persephone's heart, which allows him to be able to bring Eurydice back, right? The thing that happens at the end is he loses faith in love. He loses faith in the power of love and the power of that connection, right? And he is not, he looks back and he loses her. And then he goes on to stop playing music, right? He gives up on love because he has experienced it and he had lost it, right? And he's brokenhearted and he thinks it'll never get better. And he ends up being torn to shreds by Maenads, who are the disciples of Dionysus, who go into these ecstatic frenzies, right? And he is torn to shreds by them because he has forsaken love, because he stopped playing his music, right? Because he has given up on Eros and Venus because he had a broken heart, which makes sense. But they were like, "Oh, hell no, right? You can't like have a gift like that and forsake it." Right. You can't deny that Venusian power. You can't deny that Eros. And so they rip him to shreds. And I think, um, you know, in the like dismemberment myths, right? It brings up vegetable gods like Osiris and Adonis, right? It is the dismemberment of the old which gives way to the new, right? New spring to come about, right? New life to come about. And I think we just came through this Easter holiday, which is very much like that. And the dismemberment sort of got turned into a crucifixion, but Orpheus was the proto Jesus. And I think Jesus won out because the graphic design was a lot better. Of a cross, it's very simple. A lyre is very difficult. And the Mithras cult, which is like a feast with a bull, is like really hard to just like scrawl on a bathroom wall or get tattooed on your neck. So that one like didn't have a chance, right? But I think getting back to the story, these sort of ideas of like dismemberment, separation, and then the reconsolidation and rebirth are really important. And I think there's a lot of that in the Pluto and Venus, right? What needs to be released and let go of and dismembered so that what is really valuable and what is aligned with our true values and passion can be remembered and come back to life. And what we exile must be courted back with beauty, right? We need to call these disparate parts of the self back with beauty, with love, the way that um Orpheus does as he goes into the underworld, right? And we need to be able to like you know, coax these things back with beauty, the parts that we have lost or pushed away or dismembered, right? That we're told this isn't good, you can't do that, you can't love like that, you can't be like that, you can't like that, right? And these things get like relegated to the unconscious, to the underworld, and we need to like call those back with beauty, right? With music, with love, with appreciation, with gifts. And so that is the astrology of the week, my friends. I think that Astrostar will give me 3 more minutes. So I just want to say one quick thing about this total eclipse in Aries, which is happening at 19 degrees and 24 minutes of Cardinal Aries on Monday, April the 8th. So we'll be talking about this next week, right? One of the ways that solar eclipses are talked about is as the death of the king, right? And the old king, right, which is like power consolidated in a specific way, right, becomes needs to be sacrificed so that that old sort of psychic consolidation, which has become divorced from the flow of life, can be recontextualized, reconstituted, and reconnected with the flow of life, right? And you know, this is sort of an old mythological fairy tale idea. Right. And there's a lot of the myth of Jason and the Argonauts, right, having to, you know, go on these quests and sort of archetypally kill the old father, the old king, right, so that his individuality and a new kind of heroic can be born. Right. And I think what is really important is breaking away from the kind of consolidated consciousness of the old way. And I think that this Aries eclipse brings this up. And I am bringing this up, right? Um, because the hero is the bringer of the new. And in order to do that, they need to undo and destroy the old, right? In a non-violent kind of destruction. But I am bringing this up because Beyonce's new album dropped, and I've been listening to that on repeat, and it is amazing. And I'm not just saying this to say that that album is great, but it is. And I'm bringing this in because it's a country album made by a Black woman, which has created a big stir in the country music world. And we can think about, you know, this on a pop culture level as like an old order, which is consolidated around the story that country music is this way, right? And then Beyonce makes this country album, which is a game changer. It is mind blowing, and it threatens the conventional order, right, of what is known as country music or like American or real Americana. And this reboot, right, this like new take on country music is a new direction which breaks the old and stagnant paradigm, right, and allows new life force to flow back into the system. And people who are clinging to what they perceive as tradition and how things should be, and the existing order where power is consolidated in a certain way, have like some serious feelings about that, right? And this comes back to the like stepmother, right? This is the king archetype who's consolidating power, right? And is like, it can only be this way, right? And then we have a new hero who steps on the scene in the form of Beyonce, who is not new, but is definitely a hero who is breaking this old paradigm. And this is the eclipse energy, something like new and wild and electric and energizing that comes into the system and threatens the old order, right? And this also brings up, with this eclipse conjunct Chiron, it's going to bring up old wounding, right? So this brings up the old American wounds, because America, this eclipse is conjunct America's natal Chiron, which is in the fourth house. And that fourth house Chiron wound, I think, has a lot to do with genocide, slavery, colonization, right? The sort of foundations of how America was formed and built. And then the mythic that was built around that, around Americana and country music and America. And to have that challenge becomes very threatening, because that brings up the core chironic wounding from the basement of the fourth house, which needs to be dealt with, right? It needs to be dealt with eventually. And I think that the Venusian musical way of beginning to like work through these problems is very skillful. And I think that this eclipse again like brings up the old order and where power is consolidated, and the new individuation of the hero, the new individual identity, the new spiritual identity, which comes online in the for the heroic. And so this is just something that I wanted to offer all y'all. And maybe you want to listen to the Cowboy Carter on repeat while this eclipse is happening. I know that that has just been on repeat in every room in my house for the past 2 days since I like found it. And so I just wanted to bring that in, because that was like a moment where I was like, oh snap, that is the energy of this eclipse. It is Beyonce doing a country album, right? And that like encapsulates all of it for me. And an eclipse is, right, this old idea of how things should be and how things are supposed to be, and what box people are in and what place people are supposed to be in and what they can do. And that album is very much about genre, right? And ideas of genre. Um, right now, Leslie asked what's my favorite song. Um, her cover of Jolene is amazing, or it's a reboot. Also, 16 cartridges, 16 carriages is phenomenal. I've been singing that one all day. But the whole album is a masterpiece from start to finish. And so I do a astrology themed radio show every week that you can find on SoundCloud or on my Patreon under Camp Wizard Camp. You can also find it in my stories on Instagram. And I'm like, how am I like, I just want to play the whole album start to finish on my next show. Like, I'm like, okay, like every song is so good in this. I'm gonna have to like figure out how to like put one of these in every show for the next like 3 months. Um, uh, Oh, I think the Jolene cover is really good, and we can talk about that, because I think it's about her and Jay-Z's relationship, and I think it has the same quality as Dolly Parton's Jolene, the same sort of longing and for like fierceness, but it's a totally different side of that coin. And I don't know. She also covers Blackbird by the Beatles. Both of these are incredibly difficult songs to cover, and I think she nails them. Anyway, so your homework for the week, if you choose to accept it, is go listen to Beyonce's new album and let me know what you think. I got to get up out of here. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're catching this on YouTube or Instagram, check me out on the AstroStar Live app. I do this conversation every week, Mondays at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, noon Central time, and 1 Eastern time. I think I said that all right. Yeah, you can find it on Astrostar. Sometimes I have it on Instagram. Sometimes I like to put it on the YouTube. Check me out. Also, follow me on Astrostar. There's a link in my stories, and there's a link in my bio. Also, check out the other great astrologers that the AstroStar app has. They are fantastic. Oh, and Quinn, yeah, the Quinn was asking about what are like stories for this Aries myth or for the Aries eclipse. And I think that the story of Jason and the Argonauts and the story of the Golden Fleece is that myth for that, like the overthrow of the old king and the old order. And I also think that the Beyonce Cowboy Carter album is a story for this eclipse. So, that is not like a traditional myth, but I think it has a mythic quality and a story quality if you follow the album all the way through. Um, anyway, yeah, check me out on Astrostar. I do my weekly astrology themed radio show each and every week on SoundCloud, on Spaz Radio, and you can find that by going to SoundCloud and looking up Camp Wizard Camp. Also, I'm going to throw a link in my stories. There will be a link in the show notes in the YouTube. Yeah, it's like this, except for instead of me talking the entire time, there's a lot of excellent music from all over the world. And then there's some of me talking as well to contextualize it. But, I like to talk about the astrology transits of the week, set it to music to give you like an embodied feeling. Also, I've got an upcoming class with Sarah Janes talking about mythology and dreaming, and this will be kicking off in May. It'll be an 8-week class going over different themes and myths. And excuse me. And we're going to have guest speakers for each class. So check that out. I'll have links in my bio and be involving myself in a media blitz, an advertising flurry to let you know how to sign up and what's going on with that. All right, that's all the Astro weather that is fit to print, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to another This Week in Space. Y'all have a great April Fool's Day and keep it cool for the Mercury in Gatorade. And I will see y'all next week. Same wizard time, same wizard channel. And until then, be well, my friends. Bye now. Let's stop this.